What is science? Science is the systematic study of the structure and behavior of the physical and natural world through observation, experimentation, and the testing of those theories against the evidence obtained. But what is forensic science? Forensic science is the application of scientific principles and techniques to matters of criminal justice, especially relating to the collection, examination, and analysis of physical evidence. So what is criminal justice? What does it mean? For most people, when they hear something about criminal justice, they think of crime-solving, bad guy-beating, world-saving superheroes. And when they hear science is used in criminal justice, they switch to doctors picking apart bodies in a morgue, gory crime scenes covered in blood, and in reality, this is all true. But forensic science can be from fingerprints and nails, to DNA, to blood and hair samples. And most forensic science is used as evidence, and this evidence is then used to imprison people. But this can't happen unless you go to court. So when did it all start? Courtroom, Criminology, and Biology, a new frontier. Forensic science has technically been used since the ancient Greek and Roman times. Some say the origins of forensic science happened to be in 1325 in medieval China. Apparently, a farmer was murdered in his field with a sickle. So-called investigators collected a bunch of the farming tool and laid them out, and the one that attracted flies in the field was used in the murder. On the other hand, it can be argued that a man named James Marsh was the first to apply forensic sciences to the real world. In 1832, he was called to give evidence as a chemist by the prosecution in a murder trial. The defendant was accused of poisoning his grandfather with arsenic in his morning coffee. Marsh performed the standard test, which he created by mixing a suspected sample with hydrogen sulfide and hydrochloric acid. While he was able to detect arsenic as yellow arsenic trisulfide, when it was shown to the jury, it had deteriorated, allowing the suspect to be acquitted due to reasonable doubt. More recently, in 1986, a man named Alec Jeffrey was recruited to find the man responsible for 2 rape murders in the UK. He used fingerprint DNA to verify a confession. The test came back in favor of the suspect, and he revealed that he was not responsible for the crimes. However, the first case like this in the United States was in 1987, when a man named Tommy Lee Andrews was convicted for rape. But this case didn't use fingerprints. His semen was recovered from the victim and was matched with his DNA profile, and he was found guilty and sentenced to 24 years in prison. Almost every year since then, people have been convicted, proven guilty or innocent, and sentenced to heavy and/or light punishments. Another 2 cases shone light onto the importance of DNA evidence. One of the more dramatic was the case of Timothy Wilson Spencer. He was convicted of multiple rapes, and during his trial, his DNA was matched with evidence, and he was sentenced to the death penalty. These are the types of cases where autopsies come in handy, and autopsies are in fact a serious part of forensic science, but they help to find DNA evidence on the bodies and/or identify the cause of death and suspects. But forensic science isn't just about DNA. Nowadays, one of the most increasingly used types of forensics is forensic animation. Forensic animation is the recreation of a crime scene or accident used to get a certain point across better than anything that could be said to a jury or a judge. It is vastly used to recreate robberies, murders, and accidents. Like in 1991, when prosecutors used forensic animation to incriminate Jim Mitchell for the murder of his own brother, Artie Mitchell. This animated production became the first one used in a criminal trial in the United States. Police used ballistics and a 911 phone call made by Artie's girlfriend to recreate the scene. This specific case allowed for the adaptation of modern shooting visuals which we use today. Following this, 1 year later, forensic animation was then used to reveal the story behind Nicole Ray Walker's death. Nicole was only 6 years old and hit by a drunk driver named Kenneth Pierce. Using the car's damage and body markings, the car crash was easily pictured for court. Prosecutors chose to take extra steps to demonstrate the path that he took for the jury. The scale animation produced for this case showed how Mr. Pierce's vehicle veered off the road and into the group, hitting and killing Ms. Walker included, before he drove away. The exhibit demonstrated the gross negligence on Mr. Pierce's part and led to Kenneth Pierce being convicted of vehicular homicide. Researchers can argue about what the actual beginning of forensic science is, and there's valid reasoning. Forensic science is the broad term used to describe forensic evidence and research as long as it's scientific. So far, DNA, which goes from fingerprints to autopsies, and animations used to picture crime scenes are the very beginnings of what we have today. Alec Jeffrey and James Marsh's research in 1986 and 1832, Tommy Lee Andrews' conviction in 1987, and the trial for Nicole Ray Walker in 1992 are the fundamentals. Though it may not seem like it, most of the evidence you see in court is forensic, unless of course it's something like a text message. We learned from Dr. Marsh how important elements and chemistry research can be. We learned from Dr. Jeffrey that fingerprints can go a long way, especially for conviction purposes. And we learned from people like Alexander Jason of a Night Group, who produced the animation for the Mitchell case, that visual aspects of crime can be just as important as scientific research. Investigators can now use DNA and other evidence collected and stored decades ago to help identify and convict criminals who have eluded the authorities for years, and even to exonerate prisoners who were wrongly convicted before today's more sophisticated methods became available. Not only this, but we are able to use little things like animation to sentence people to death. Think about how many people got away with murder, kidnapping, rape, robbery, and think of how many people were wrongly accused and punished for these crimes because we had no way to prove innocence or guilt. In the future, other ways of dealing with forensics will come about, and those who create it will look at the research we have today. Since the discovery of DNA in the 1950s, DNA allowed us to study genetics and human sciences, and therefore allowed us to put away criminals, as if that wasn't obvious. In 1953, the double helix, aka DNA, was discovered. The twisted ladder of acid is finally going to be used. And let's not forget the men who discovered it, James Watson and Francis Crick. Forensic scientists will always circle back to this principle no matter what, and so will police officers in the field. Our advancements in science and technology formed the basic of forensic science around 40 years ago, when the first rape and murder cases that truly needed forensic evidence were taking place. From now on, criminology and biology in the courtroom will only advance. There's no stopping in this continuous cycle of research and discovery. Courtroom, Criminology, and Biology, a new frontier.